Hello and welcome to Always Bored Never Boring. Today, Tuesday the 14th of May 2024, is the big day. The day that Archon Studio launched their Gamefound crowdfunding campaign for Masters of the Universe Battleground, a tabletop skirmish game in which small groups of heroic warriors and evil villains clash for the future of Eternia. This is a game that has actually been around for 2 years, and I have been collecting and playing it since its initial release. However, originally Archon Studio only had the rights to distribute the game throughout Europe. Now, thanks to a license extension, players all around the world can get involved in the action, and the crowdfunding campaign is an opportunity for new players to get up to speed quickly by accessing all the products that have been released so far. Additionally, and this is the really exciting bit for me, the campaign will launch 2 brand new factions, the Snake Men and the Preternian Heroes, plus many other characters. If this sounds like something you might be interested in, you will find a link to the campaign in the video description below. Personally, I am really looking forward to it and can't wait to finally get the Snake Men and to see what other options will be opening up for my favourite factions. So today I have the newest faction pack to show you, the Wave 7 Fight Against Evil pack, comprising 6 characters from She-Ra's Great Rebellion. Some of you may recall that despite being a huge fan of the game and having every release up to and including Wave 6, I was in 2 minds about getting this particular pack. Not because I didn't expect it to be good, but simply because I don't have the same nostalgic connection with She-Ra and her friends as I do with the original Masters of the Universe. Fortunately, Archon Studio took the decision out of my hands by offering to send me this set for review purposes, and I am really happy they did, because even though I am unlikely to play this faction myself, the box still includes a lot of cards that I can use in army builds for other factions, plus cool new terrain features and scenarios that I can definitely make use of. My daughter has also expressed an interest in taking on the role of the Rebellion to give my beloved evil warriors a stern talking to, so this could be a jumping on point to the game system for her as well. But of course, best of all, it means I get to make this video and show you exactly what one of these faction expansions is like, what kind of contents they contain, and what kind of quality you can expect. If we look at the back of the box, we can see we are getting 1 rules book, 1 build manual, which is also available online, 6 characters, that's She-Ra, Bo, Froster, Angela, Glimmer, and Caster Speller. Gets me every time. There are also 8 new terrain accessories to help you build the Magic Forest, 37 cards comprising new weapons, equipment, characters, fate and glory, and 2 cardboard tokens that are used for certain character abilities. With the addition of some Fate and Glory cards from the core set, that is everything you will need to field the Great Rebellion, with plenty of options. A standard game uses forces of 100 points, but the 6 characters here come to over 100 points before you even give them any equipment, and you really aren't going to send She-Ra into battle without her Sword of Protection. And I think these contents are fairly representative of the large faction packs in general. For example, the Evil Horde box contains 8 characters, 4 terrain pieces, and 37 cards, and we know that the upcoming Snake Men faction pack has 6 characters, 8 terrain pieces, 34 cards, and 6 tokens. In terms of plastic, you get 3 sprues. 2 of these sprues are identical. They each contain 4 of the Magic Forest terrain pieces, and these are really nice, with little outcrops of strange plants everywhere. However, I do think it would be good to have a new board that has a more fitting aesthetic for this magical forest terrain. At the moment we have 2 different board designs, the Wasteland from the core set and then the Preternian environment from the Wave 2 Legends of Preternia box. Neither work exceptionally well with the magical forest terrain. But all 8 of these terrain elements cover 4 hexes on the game board, and they all have the same rules. They are classed as low obstacles, which means they don't block line of sight and they do provide cover. But because this is a magical terrain, they serve as teleports. If you are adjacent to a magic forest, you can teleport to a space adjacent to any magical forest on the board, but it will cost you 1 mana for each space you travel. That's a pretty heavy cost in mana, which is one of the main resources in the game for powering your abilities and gaining rerolls on actions, but it does open up great tactical options for ambushing your enemies or for getting out of trouble when someone ambushes you. The final frame contains all 6 of our characters, and as always, Archon Studio have done a wonderful job here. The miniatures are gorgeous, but they are also rather dainty. If you are used to miniatures with more heroic proportions, you may be shocked at first with how petite some characters are, especially these more lithe female characters. And there are a few things to note here. Every miniature has its own scenic base, so you don't need to worry about basing them up. Also, there are no build options here. The models are all keyed to go together in a very specific way, with no alternative weapon loadouts or anything like that. Despite that, they aren't push fit, you will need to use glue to assemble them. In terms of necessary tools, I recommend side cutters for removing them from the frames, a mold line remover, which I have found you don't need all that often with these miniatures, and then plastic cement for assembly. Finally, if you aren't into painting, do note that each faction has its own coloured plastic, so even if you leave them in their natural colours, each faction will look distinct on the tabletop, and the coloured plastic is more visually interesting than the standard grey plastic that many companies use. Once assembled, the miniatures look fantastic. I think Archon Studio are getting better and better all the time with their miniatures, and their Battleground range is really special. They capture the essence of the characters so well, without being too fiddly, and the scenic bases have a good balance between being simple, yet still having enough terrain elements on them to add a degree of interest. Scenic bases also save you having to worry about texture paint or messing around with grit and flock. As a huge fan of the franchise, I am just delighted to have miniatures for all my favourite characters that look this nice. Now, I'm not going to be painting any of these miniatures in the video today, but I am hoping to have some more Masters of the Universe painting videos on the channel very soon for some of the characters I really love. Let's take a closer look at how She-Ra and her friends operate in the game, and obviously I am starting with the only character I really know all that much about, She-Ra herself. Now, I appreciate if you haven't played the game yet, some of what follows might not make 100% sense, but I'll try to explain as clearly as possible, and I am hoping to put together a video that drills more deeply into gameplay later on. First of all, building a force is based on points. The cards in the game don't have the points printed on them, you have to download them from the Archon website. This is so that Archon can easily update and balance points without invalidating all of your game cards. She-Ra weighs in at 19 points, the same as He-Man, but a little less than Skeletor or Hordak. Each character has 7 stats. Wounds is the amount of damage they can take before being knocked out. Toughness is how many dice they roll to resist damage. Mind is how many dice they roll to resist spells and skills. Power is how many dice they roll when using magic. Perception is how many dice they roll when making ranged attacks. Strength is how many dice they roll in melee. And speed is how many spaces they can move. Speed is divided into a standard move and a special focused move representing the distance the character can move at a run. She-Ra has 5 wounds, 3 toughness, 3 mind, 3 power, 3 perception, 4 strength, and a speed of 5 or 8 when focused. And the most important thing to know is that in most cases in this game, you make opposed dice rolls, and commonly a roll of 4+ is a success. For example, if She-Ra attacks in melee with her Sword of Protection, she would roll 4 dice, her strength, and each 4+ would be a success. Her opponent would roll dice equal to their toughness, and each 4+ would cancel one of She-Ra's successes. She-Ra then refers to the chart at the bottom of her Sword of Protection to see how much damage she inflicts based on how many successes she scored. There is more to it than that. 6s explode so you can re-roll them, and many weapons and skills will modify the dice in some way, but that is the basic premise. Every character gets 2 abilities. These are either passive and have no cost associated with them, or they have a cost of some kind, either action points or mana. She-Ra's abilities are passive, so automatically trigger when applicable. Her superhuman senses allow her to gain 1 mana token whenever any of her allies gains a buff token. A big part of this game is applying buffs and debuffs to characters in order to manipulate what they can achieve within a given turn, and the Great Rebellion have a number of skills that foster a spirit of teamwork between the crew as they buff each other or draw strength from the buffs of those around them. Speaking of which, She-Ra's second ability, One for All, lets her take buffs from allies anywhere on the battlefield to gain additional dice on her attack, allowing for a devastating strike. The reverse of each character card shows how much equipment and which types of equipment a character can be armed with. She-Ra is allowed 1 melee weapon, which would usually be her Sword of Protection, 1 ranged weapon, 1 piece of armour, 1 shield, and 2 trinkets. That gives her access to most upgrades in the game except for magic spells. Any items a character takes have to be paid for with additional points, and each character is allocated 1 exclusive piece of basic equipment that no other character may use. They do not have to take this item, but they do have to pay the points for it if they do. She-Ra's Sword of Protection costs 3 points, taking She-Ra up to 22 points in total. The sword is a melee weapon that doesn't grant any additional dice when attacking and has the potential to inflict up to 3 wounds. Its main strength is in defense, as it allows She-Ra to spend up to 2 mana tokens to gain 2 extra defense dice. One thing you will probably notice about this game is it really captures the theme of the Masters of the Universe. For the heroes, there is often a real need to work as a team and rely on your allies. She-Ra is a reasonably strong character, but her true power comes from the support of her friends. And don't expect a character like He-Man to be a one-man wrecking machine either. He may pack a punch, but he will still need allies to stand against the might of Skeletor's magic. Creating strategies and powerful synergies is how you win the game. Moving on, we have Bo, who costs 17 points. He is Wounds 5, Toughness 3, Mind 2, Power 2, Perception 4, Strength 3, and has a speed of 5 or 8 when focused. His Golden Heart ability allows him to have up to 3 different buffs at a time, when usually a character is only allowed 1 at a time. That is a really powerful ability, and also makes him a really strong character to pair with She-Ra. His Heroic Intervention ability isn't passive, it requires 1 mana to use. It lets him discard 1 buff of his choice to instantly gain 1 action and 1 mana. You never seem to have enough actions in this game, so this is a pretty strong ability, although as it's an active ability, you can only use it once per turn. Bo gets 5 upgrade slots, 1 melee, 1 ranged, 1 armor, and 2 trinkets. His basic equipment is the Combo, which costs 2 points, has a range of 16 inches, and gains +1 attack dice for each buff on Bo. It can inflict a maximum of 2 damage. Next, we have the ridiculously named Caster Spella, weighing in at 17 points. She has 4 wounds, 1 toughness, 4 mind, 5 power, 2 perception, 2 strength, and a speed of 5 or 8 when focused. So, classic spellcaster build. Powerful with magic, but crumbles like cracker bread in a fight. Her Magic for All ability is an amazing way to get mana where it needs to go. You pay 2 mana and then roll your power dice. For each success, you can give one of Caster Spella's mana tokens to an activated ally. That's a really good way to ensure She-Ra is never short of the mana she needs. As a bonus, Caster Spella has the passive ability Arcane Arts, which means as long as she has a buff, the mana cost of her spells and skills is reduced by 1 to a minimum of 0. That means she would only need to spend 1 mana to activate Magic for All, giving her 1 extra mana to distribute. As you would expect, she isn't allowed to take armor or shields, but she can have up to 2 magic spells and 3 trinkets. Her basic starting item is the Trinket Spinning Disc, which costs just 1 point, which is a bargain, because it gives her a free reroll on magic attacks for every ally with a buff. With 2 spell slots, you can really customize what kind of mage you would like her to be. Offensive, defensive, or balanced. That should be fun to play around with. Next up we have Angela, who costs 18 points. She has 4 wounds, 2 toughness, 4 mind, 4 power, 3 perception, 4 strength, and a speed of 6 or 9 when focused. Angela's abilities are quite unusual as they rely on careful planning of where and when she activates. Battleground has a really nifty initiative system where each player will select a Fate or Glory card from their hand. The cards are revealed at the same time, and the player who played the card with the highest initiative value, the number in the top left of the card, will go first, selecting one of their characters to activate with the card they played and resolving all actions before their opponent does the same with the card they played. Cards with lower initiative values generally provide some kind of powerful bonus, so you have to balance going first against having more resources. We will look more closely at some of these cards in a moment, and it will make more sense then. For now, it's enough to know that Angela benefits from being thoughtful and methodical and activating after her opponents. If she activates with a card that has initiative 2 or lower, her never-ending life ability triggers. This will give her a regeneration buff that will heal 1 damage when it is subsequently removed from her. Her Selfless Leader ability can be used in a turn when she was activated with an initiative of 5 or lower. It costs 1 action and 1 mana, but lets her test her power -1, and if she gets at least 1 success, she can apply a regeneration buff to an ally within 8 inches. Angela has 6 upgrade slots, 1 melee, 1 magic, 1 armor, 1 shield, and 2 trinkets. Her basic item is the Angelic Sword, which costs 3 points. The sword grants additional bonuses depending on how low Angela's initiative was, granting up to 2 additional dice on the attack roll and inflicting up to 3 wounds. Next is Froster at 16 points. 4 wounds, 2 toughness, 3 mind, 4 power, 2 perception, 3 strength, and a speed of 5 or 8 when focused. She has the ability Freezing Rain, which lets her spend 1 mana after activation cards have been revealed to reduce or increase the initiative of one of the cards by 2. This is a great ability with several applications. You can flip the tables on your opponent and force them to go second, or you can lower the initiative on your own card so that it can trigger abilities like Angela's Never-Ending Life. It also works in conjunction with Froster's second ability Sub-Zero, which lets Froster spend a mana to interrupt an opponent within 12 inches if they were activated with an initiative of 7 or higher. Interruptions are special actions that characters can take under certain circumstances during an opponent's turn. Usually, a character can interrupt if they have used their action earlier in the turn to go on Overwatch, but many skills and items allow for interruptions in other situations, which can really disrupt your opponent's plans. Froster has 6 upgrade slots, 1 melee, 2 magic, 1 armor, and 2 trinkets. Her basic equipment is the Ice spell at 3 points. It has a range of 12 inches, costs 1 mana to cast, and if she uses it during an interruption, she gets to roll an extra dice. Additionally, normally when attacking during an interruption, there is a penalty to the scope of the success, which means you have to -1 from your dice rolls and would therefore get successes on a roll of 5 or more instead of 4 or more. When using the Ice spell during interruptions, that penalty is not applied. Note that the Ice spell can inflict up to 2 wounds, but can also inflict the debuff Cripple, which reduces the target's speed by 2. The final member of the team is Glimmer, who is the cheapest at just 14 points. She has 4 wounds, 1 toughness, 3 mind, 4 power, 3 perception, 2 strength, and a speed of 5 or 8 when focused. Her ability Guiding Light lets her overwrite the initiative value of a card played to activate her with 10, giving her a very good chance of activating first. Her second ability is Invisibility, which costs 2 mana. It lets her select an ally within 12 inches and gives them a special glimmer marker that lasts until they are activated or the current round ends. While the marker is in play, they can only be targeted from adjacent hexes. Glimmer can be armed with 1 ranged weapon, 2 spells, and 2 trinkets. Her basic item is the Beam of Light, which costs 1 point. It has a range of 16 inches and can target friend or foe. The spell costs 1 mana to cast, but if Glimmer was activated on an initiative of 8 or higher, the attack costs her 1 less action than normal. It doesn't do any damage, but it inflicts the blind debuff and can also teleport the target up to 3 hexes. That's it for new characters, but you also get a stack of extra cards which can be used with any faction, but which are designed to work well with the Rebellion's playstyle. There are 6 additional weapons. Mighty Bonk, good grief, is a spell that costs 1 point, requires 1 mana, adds 1 dice to the power roll, and targets an adjacent enemy. It can inflict a wound and push the target up to 2 hexes. 3 Moon Presence is a 1 point spell that requires 1 mana and affects all friendly characters on the battlefield with a buff token. You roll power dice -1, and on a success, affected characters lose their buff but gain 2 mana. On 2 successes, they also gain a focus token, which will make their next test or attack easier. The last spell in the pack is Moonless Night, which costs 2 points and requires 1 mana to use. It affects all characters on the battlefield with a debuff token. On 1 success, the target will lose their debuff and 2 mana tokens. On 2 or more successes, the target will also take a wound as well. We get 1 new ranged weapon, the Bubble Projector, which clocks in at a hefty 4 points. It has a range of 16 inches and can inflict up to 2 wounds, but if it scores at least 2 successes, an ally within 8 inches gains a protection debuff that will aid them on their next defense roll. The Staff of Light is 2 points. It's a melee weapon that can inflict up to 2 wounds, but its best feature is, when the character activates, if they have a buff, they automatically gain a mana token. The final weapon is the Axe Comb, which costs 3 points. It has a -1 penalty on your strength roll, but for each ally on the board with a buff, you gain 1 dice to a maximum of 3. So as long as you can keep your allies buffed, the axe has the potential for some big hits. The pack also includes 7 item cards, 5 trinkets, 1 armor, and 1 shield. And one of the things I really love about this game, something you may already have noticed with the weapons, is that all of the upgrade cards are really interesting. You rarely get a shield that is +1 defense dice, or a sword that will let you reroll 1 attack dice. Instead, the upgrades have intricate special abilities, often with strong advantages offset by a downside to mitigate through clever play. you have to think carefully about how to incorporate each new upgrade into your team's playstyle and strategy for the battle ahead. Look at the Galactic Shoes for example, which cost 2 points. They don't just give you a speed stat boost, instead you have to activate them by discarding a buff token from the character to gain a free 2-hex move action. It's a really powerful item, but only in teams that make a habit of generating lots of buffs. The Galactic Gauntlets also cost 2 points. They should ideally be given to a character who can generate a lot of successes when attacking, because if the wearer scores at least 3 successes, they gain a protection buff. You can see how you could also combine the gauntlets with the shoes. You make an attack, gain the buff, then spend the buff to make a free move action with the shoes. The Heart Emblem, which costs 1 point, is another item that benefits teams that are good at generating buffs. Each time the wearer gains a buff, they also gain a mana token. The Pink Tiara is the flip side of the Heart Emblem. It also costs 1 point, and it grants the wearer a mana token every time they gain a debuff. Then we have the Halo at a cost of 2 points. This is a good item for Angela, as if the wearer is activated with initiative 3 or lower, they gain +1 dice on all their attacks for that activation. Rather than providing flat stat boosts, armor in this game often only triggers under certain circumstances. For example, the Space Armor, which costs 2 points, gives the wearer 1 extra defense dice, but only against attacks from characters who activated with initiative 7 or higher. Finally, we have the Energy Shield at 3 points. It improves your defense against attacks in your front arc, but only if you have a buff. The final cards in this set are Fate and Glory cards. When you are building your team, you create a deck of 20 Fate cards and 9 Glory cards. As I have already explained, before activating a character, both players will secretly select either 1 Fate or 1 Glory card to play, and these are then revealed simultaneously with the player who played the highest initiative going first. In addition to the initiative value, each card grants a number of actions and mana tokens to the character you are activating. For example, if I was to use this card to activate She-Ra, she would gain 2 actions and 2 mana tokens. Additionally, she would get a bonus from the lower part of the card that is usually 1 extra mana token or an ability for a specific situation. This particular card has She-Ra's ultimate skill on it, which gives her and all allies within 8 inches +1 on their defense tests. I'm not going to go through all 10 cards, they are largely self-explanatory, but I did want to point out this Initiative 10 card. Notice that it's very likely your character will activate first if you play this card, but they will only get 2 actions. Furthermore, as they are acting recklessly, they will be at -1 to defense tests for the rest of the round. Instead of playing a Fate card, you can play a Glory card. These are functionally identical to Fate cards, but more powerful, as the bonus they provide is either an additional action or a chance to score bonus victory points if you can complete the challenge on them. And that's all the cards. Sorry if that got a bit technical for anyone who has never played, but hopefully it helps to demonstrate the kind of thinking you need to employ when building your teams, and then actually using those teams on the battlefield. It's not always an easy game to immediately grasp the best way to approach a situation, and it does reward time spent carefully working out synergies and building a force around a specific tactic. Do feel free to ask questions in the comments if you aren't sure about anything I've said here. Oh, and we mustn't forget, this expansion box also includes a rules book. You don't get much in the way of rules, just details of how the Magic Forest terrain works and clarifications for a few of the included characters. But you do get a selection of new scenarios. Each scenario has a layout for the battlefield, some simple rules for the placement of objectives and deployment, and occasionally some special rules to give the game more of a narrative flavour. There are 4 new standard battlefields, which are the ones you would use in a tournament-style head-to-head game. These battlefields are generally symmetrical, offering no distinct advantage no matter where you deploy. Then there are 2 advanced battlegrounds that are more narrative. One involves characters trying to collect plants from a forbidden forest, and the other depicts a dangerous ambush. I still wish the game would lean more into narrative scenarios. I would love to see more battles that create interesting storylines and feel more like the climactic moments of an episode of the Filmation series, but these advanced battlegrounds are certainly a move in the right direction. And that really is everything. I have to say, even though the Rebellion isn't one of my top choices for factions, I still got excited looking through the options here, figuring out how cards work together and theory crafting forces with them. I'm not going to lie, the Rebellion will never be my faction. I will probably never run them myself, but I think it is a testament to the game that even without the pull of nostalgia, even with characters that don't speak to my inner 7-year-old, I can still get enthusiastic about what these new options are bringing to the table, and I am certainly not opposed to the idea of my daughter bringing She-Rat out to fight against my beloved evil warriors, just so I can see what they are really made of. But I have talked for long enough. All that's left to do is thank Archon Studio for sending this pack for review, and to thank you for watching. Remember, if you are interested in this game, there is a referral link to the Gamefound campaign in the video description below. And as always, if you like the video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really like the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.